Hello everyone, my name is Todd Bullock and I'll be your presenter today. Welcome to the American Public University System Symposium on Current Science Knowledge in Support of Popular Science Writing. And the science writing we're going to talk about today is the book Sparing Nature, the Conflict Between Human Population Growth and Earth's Biodiversity. This book was written by Jeffrey K. McKee and was published in 2005. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a picture of the cover of the book. A little bit about the author. Jeffrey K. McKee is a professor at The Ohio State University in the Anthropology Department, where he has taught since 1996. Professor McKee has over 3 decades of field experience to include excavations he led in South Africa. And he is a published author of 4 books and several papers. Professor McKee is a physical anthropologist who conducts research on hominid evolution and paleoecology. Currently, Jeffrey McKee is focusing on computer modeling and simulations of the evolutionary and fossilization process, trying to understand at what pace and what causes of human evolution in the ecological environment. I have a picture of the author there on the right. Jeffrey K. McKee is hands down a leader when it comes to biodiversity and what the population growth has done to it. While researching the subject, his name came up several times as either the author, co-author, or contributor to 75% of the material I found. Sparing Nature, I believe, has set a precedence in the science community on this subject. What Jeffrey McKee does in his book is he makes it easy for the reader to understand, and he makes it easy to raise their consciousness on the issue of the population's effect on the biodiversity. Instead of just being matter-of-fact, in-your-face, very blunt, nail you with the facts and pound you with the facts approach to the subject, he gently persuades you into understanding what the problems are and what can be done to fix them. And he explains the situation in a lighter manner, and the reader doesn't feel down or depressed when they get finished reading the book. Again, we have another picture of the author to the right here. So to get into this, what is the essence of Sparing Nature? We've boiled it down to 3 points. The human population growth and how it relates to the loss of biodiversity. The most effective means available to prevent further biodiversity loss is to proactively slow, stop, or reverse the human population increase. And number 3, preserving the health of our planet through meaningful conservation. The human population growth and how it relates to the loss of biodiversity. The rate of the human population is increasing, causes concern, and how that growth is weakening the Earth's biodiversity is alarming. Human population in 1910 was not quite 2 billion, and by the year 2000, the population had reached 6 billion. The 20th century witnessed a remarkable increase in the human population. Jeffrey McKee gives an example in his book, and I kind of felt like I wanted to add this in here because it does demonstrate just how fast the population is growing. He says in 1977, when Elvis died, there were 48 professional Elvis impersonators. Only 48. In 1996, there were 7,328. If this rate of growth were to continue by the year 2012, there would have been 1 in 4 people would have been an Elvis impersonator. McKee says he finds this profoundly odd, but it does get the point across. I tend to agree with him. When the book Sparing Nature was published, more than 200,000 people were being added to the planet each day. So let's think about that. Every day, there were 200,000 babies being born. 200,000 mouths that needed to be fed. That's amazing to me. The human population has grown faster and more devastating than any other large vertebrate in history. Humans consume about 42% of the Earth's terrestrial net primary productivity, 30% of the marine net primary productivity, and 50% of the freshwater net productivity each year. 40% of the Earth's land is devoted to human food production, which is a huge jump from the 7% in the 1700s. This population growth drives the need for increasingly more resources to be produced by the limited supply the Earth has to give. This is a dangerous cycle that humans have created. Humans produce high-yielding crops, which increases what I call, quote unquote, the good life, which increases procreation and population. I mean, that's how it happens. People are living the good life, they're eating well, they procreate, and the population increases. You can look back, or you can look at countries that don't have a lot of food and don't have a lot. It's very hard for them to grow crops and things like that. The procreation is not near as much as say it is here in the States. This means as people procreate and they have these crops, they need to grow more crops to feed more mouths. It's just a cyclic effect that happens. You know, more mouths mean more crops, and that just increases every year. And this cycle also goes for things like food from the sea or oil production to fuel our power plants, because we have, as humans, we love that electricity, you know? The Earth's resources are limited, and as the human population grows, the resource that make up the Earth's diverse biodiversity is being lost. But humans depend on the resources to survive. Unfortunately, with the growth of the population comes the loss of the Earth's biodiversity. With the Earth's biodiversity being lost, the chances of human survival on Earth also decrease. Eventually, humans will run out of natural resources to exploit. I have a picture over here to the right, and it shows, I don't know if that's rainforest or timberlands or exactly where it is, but you can see it's been clear cut. And yes, we'll get some tangible things out of that. As humans, we'll get some timber and we'll get some cropland. But the timber will be used up and the cropland will be used up if it's not tended to right, and everything there will be useless. And that will be a dead habitat. And that severely weakens our biodiversity, because you take this little plot of land with however many other little plots of land have been done that same day on Earth. It cannot grow back that fast, and we're using it up. The science behind what the author writes about in Sparing Nature is solid. The only problem with this subject and doing studies on it is it takes long periods of time to conduct and formulate meaningful data. And that is time we're running short on. Proactivity. Proactively slowing, stopping, and reversing the human population increase. This is number 2. McKee says in his book, there are too many copulating people who don't take adequate precautions to prevent pregnancies, and it need not be that way. McKee presents that there's a need for family planning. That is the most effective conservation tactic that humans can use. Too often, family planning gets whitewashed with being muddled in debates over abortion, and in some cases the use of contraceptives can be controversial. Instead of being abortion clinics, these clinics need to provide and can provide necessary tools and educational resources for family planning, and simply educate people on how to prevent unplanned pregnancies. The irony of the population problem is that, like it or not, many births are unwanted by the parents. As a human population, we must figure out a way to educate people on how to prevent these unwanted births. McKee writes in Sparing Nature that there are many ways to avoid pregnancies. Contraceptives and vasectomies are very good options. And he gives the example. The Iran government set up a program that sponsored vasectomies for married men. They educated them to alleviate any fears, and they gave them the free vasectomy surgery. The men were happy, and the results showed. In just 1 decade, the vasectomies combined with government-provided contraceptives cut the population growth rate in half. And that's a huge cut. Still, many people around the world do not understand the big picture when it comes to how having many children stresses our resources and jeopardizes the sustainability of the planet. Preserving the health of our planet through meaningful conservation. There's 2 types of conservation we talk about in the book, or that McKee talks about in the book, and that's simple conservation and complex conservation. Simple conservation is, quote unquote, the little things. It's turning off a fan or a light when you leave a room. Turn down the thermostat in the winter. Turn off the tap when you're brushing your teeth. Recycle waste. Carpool to work. Consume less food. Don't drive around in a parking lot looking for a spot. Park and walk the extra distance. McKee witnessed this in a parking lot one time, and he said he did some rough math, and that if Americans would just park sooner and walk a few extra yards, in 1 year they could save enough fuel to supply all of South Africa's petroleum needs for nearly a full work week. Amazing to me. That is just amazing. That is a lot of fuel to save. Type 2 conservation is complex conservation. Complex conservation is on a large scale. We're talking about the protection of wilderness areas, timberlands, oceans, lakes, streams, and existing farmlands. Huge plots of land that have many different habitats and ecosystems within them. Complex conservation is not simple and easy. And one of the problems with ecology, it was relatively young when the book was written in 2005. But it was asking a very complicated question, and that question was how an ecosystem works. And what makes that such a complicated question is it involves bringing together data on plant and animal taxonomy, evolution, anatomy, physiology, behavior genetics, biochemistry, and much, much more. The loss of biodiversity and what it means to us humans. This is getting down to the brass tacks here. Eventually, the Earth will not be able to provide the means to sustain the pressure humans have put on it. For example, the average ecological footprint of a human is about 2.3 hectares of land, which is bigger than 3 soccer fields. According to the World Commission on Environment and Development, there are only 1.7 hectares of productive land available for every human. So already the scales are tipped one way. We're very heavy. We need to lighten that load somehow and get down to that 1.7, if not lower. For humans to slow this extinction race down, we must slow population or become much more sustainable in the resources we use from the earth, which in turn should make a smaller demand on the land. Over on the right, I have a figure, and it shows the countries and the hectare acres per capita that people use in those countries. And if you look here at the United States, it looks to me as we're looking at the 8 to 10 range, which is way, way beyond where we need to be. So we need to raise awareness, we need education, and we need to find sustainable practices that we can use in this country. When all 3 scales of biodiversity, the ecosystem, species, and genetic scales, are healthy, we will have a strong, thriving biodiversity. As a society, we should be very concerned with the rate at which we are losing our planet's biodiversity. With a weak or weakening biodiversity, you will have loss of habitat, you'll have loss of ecosystems, and loss of species. It's a fact. Change is going to happen on this earth, and having a strong biodiversity is going to help different habitats adjust, adapt, and overcome the changes to stay alive. But having a weak biodiversity makes it easy to lose habitats and species. People need to be educated enough to realize that when a piece of timberland is clear-cut to build a shopping center, no matter how small it is, another habitat is threatened and hurt. The importance of being aware of human population growth's devastation on biodiversity may help to slow the extinction of species around the world. In closing, I'd like to leave this final thought with you about Earth's biodiversity and the human population growth. And if you remember nothing, remember this when you leave. In the end, if humans do go extinct, it will be because we have literally outgrown our planet. Thank you.